Patriots, where they could have fell to down 3 games in that series, but they came back, came home, and got the victory. How does that change the complexion when you look at the Pelicans and the Warriors as a series? Does New Orleans actually stand a chance?
Well, it all comes down to this game. The series complexion has changed totally. When it's 2-1, you're 1 game from tying it up, or you're 1 game from being down 3-1. Either way you put it, it just comes down to how Game 4 plays out. It comes down to who plays the hardest, who executes the most, takes care of the ball. But that's what it comes down to. When you're down 2-1, you know, you have a little bit more confidence because you think, you know what? We're right there. We can tie this thing. We can tie this thing up. It's within reach.
It's different when you are 0-2 on the road and you come home and you get that first game. You got more confidence. You believe that you can come back and win that 4th game, and then you come out and play with a different intensity. And they also played well in the 2nd game up there in Oakland as well.
One of the things we mentioned a little bit earlier was the fact that Golden State, they know how to win in the playoffs on the road. They've done it 16 straight times in the postseason. Do you see them being able to pull out this one in Game 4, and why?
Well, yes, I see them being able to, because they're a great basketball team. They need Curry to play better. They need everybody to play better. I don't think anybody on their team shot the ball extremely well or played extremely well. I think that, you know, they got there and the long trip from the West Coast down to New Orleans, and I think they'll be much better today. New Orleans is going to have to come out and play better than they did the game before in order to hold them off.
All right, let's head down to NOLA where we find our Hall of Famer, David Aldridge. Hey, Rajon Rondo set the franchise record, 21 assists against the Warriors in Game 3. Playoff Rondo, that's an interesting concept, DA, but is it a real thing?
Well, he hates that name, but, you know, he certainly has played outstanding in the postseason. Built on, I think, a solid regular season down here. I just think this has been a really good fit for him, with Alvin Gentry especially, but also knowing and playing well with DeMarcus Cousins in Sacramento a couple of years ago. There was a good sense of comfort level there, and he's been terrific. He's been the player that we have seen in several different iterations, whether it's in Boston or in Chicago in the playoffs. He just plays at a really high level. You go back to that series last year, you know, when he got hurt, that turned that whole series around with Boston because they had dominated him the first 2 games. So it's a big difference when he's on the floor and being aggressive and really setting the tone. I mean, he got to AD and said, look, you need to be AD. We can't have you just be like ordinary guy. You need to be all-star MVP level Anthony Davis, and he responded. And that's the leadership that Rondo shows this team, and he does it in different ways. There's different things that he tells different people, but the message is always the same. We need you, and he does a great job of that.
Well, Steve Kerr spoke this afternoon about Rondo going underneath Steph Curry's foot on a 3-point attempt, and we know Draymond and Rondo got into it in Game 3. Is there a limit to the level of agitation that's still positive for New Orleans when it comes to Rondo?
Well, sure, but look, again, this is the playoffs, guys. I mean, you guys know that. This is not, you know, regular season game in January. This is playoff basketball. People are going to be on edge. You need to play with some edge. You're playing against great teams. And if you don't come with edge and force, you're going to get embarrassed. You know, Rondo has been terrific for New Orleans. You know, Draymond does the exact same thing in his way for Golden State. They both bring the sauce that that a good team needs. You know, you don't want to have 12 choir boys. You know, you can't have, you know, 12 guys that are all thinking about themselves, but you can't have 12 choir boys either. So you need somebody that's going to be that edge guy, and those are the roles that each of those guys play for their teams.
Look, in Game 3, Steph Curry shot 31% from the floor. Klay Thompson, 40% from the floor. Is that a product of a change in defensive scheme for the Pelicans, or were the Splash Brothers just simply off?
Well, look, I mean, Curry, you know, is coming back from the MCL sprain. You would expect him to kind of be up and down as he gets his conditioning back. Klay, they just did a good job, and I thought, and Klay missed a lot of open shots in Game 3. But what they are doing with Klay and also with Durant too is really getting in their airspace the last couple of games. They've done a much better job of closing out to them and not allowing them to kind of have those open looks that they had in Game 1 where they were just wide open layup, you know, practice shots. They've taken those away and made them shoot much more contested shots the last couple of games, and the numbers reflect that. So, you know, when somebody comes up and is playing you tight, you got to give them a blow by. You got to get an and one. You got to go to the basket and dunk. You know, you can't lay it up in the playoffs. And so I would expect all three of those guys, starting with Steph, to be much more aggressive today in Game 4.
You used the term starting with Steph. He was back in the starting lineup in Game 3. Warriors changed that lineup and put JaVale McGee in there as well. Are there any changes for Game 4?
Well, we haven't gotten them yet. You know, Steve Kerr does not disclose those things in his pregame meeting with the media. I'd be surprised if they went with the same lineup. You know, JaVale just it did not have an impact on the game, as he had an impact early in the San Antonio series, but he was playing against more traditional bigs then. Anthony Davis is a great player, but he is not a catch the ball with his back to the basket and take 3 dribbles and post up guy. I mean, he wants to face up, he wants to take you off the dribble, he wants to shoot threes, he wants to do it all off of movement. So that is not the best matchup for JaVale, and certainly not on the switches when you're trying to guard Jrue Holiday or Rondo or somebody like that. So this just might not be the best series for JaVale. The problem that Steve Kerr has is that I don't know that any of his bigs really work well against AD, and you run the risk if you play Draymond on him, which you can do. You run the risk of Draymond getting a couple early fouls. So it's a back and forth. It's a cost benefit analysis that he has to do. But would it shock me if Iguodala was back in the starting lineup? No, it would not.